This episode is brought to you by the Your Next Chapter Business Club. It provides community, resources, coaching, and training for women in business. In fact, everything you need so you can confidently grow you and your business each and every month. The club is now open and I would love to welcome you in. You can find out more details at angelarasmus.com/club. Inspiration, clarity, confidence, and wholehearted business strategy. Welcome to Your Next Chapter, the podcast especially for women in their 40s and beyond who know that business and personal development go hand in hand. Tune in each week for marketing, mindset, and personal growth strategies, along with inspiring stories from women around the world who are creating new businesses and lives that are personally fulfilling and financially rewarding. If you're looking to create a business and life you love, you're in great company. Let's find out what will unfold in your next chapter. I'm your host, Angela Rasmus, and I'm so delighted that you're here. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Your Next Chapter podcast. This is your host, Angela Rasmus, and you've joined us for another episode in our series on purpose, passion, and reinvention. Now, this is when I'm talking to a wonderful, wholehearted bunch of women from different places around the world and talking about how they evolved from their previous chapters in business and life into the work that they're doing today. That feeling of really being aligned and on purpose and making that impact in the world that they feel they are most here to make. And a little asterisk there, impact does not mean that you have to take over the world and impact on the lives of millions. It can be the impact you have on a single person. So I don't want you to get mixed up the idea of purpose having to be enormous and significant in that respect. Purpose hits you most fully in your heart, and that's the work that we are here to do. So I am so delighted because I'm getting to have a conversation again today with the gorgeous Tammy Roth, who is from Nashville, Tennessee. I promised her I wouldn't do my funny Australian accent on that one. Now, we first met and spoke in a tele-summit that I did several years ago, and we had an immediate connection, and I knew when I was talking about this topic that Tammy was someone I needed to come back to and continue that wholehearted conversation. So Tammy, welcome, and thank you so much for spending your time with me again today.
Oh, thank you. It's one of my favorite topics.
Oh, it's a biggie, isn't it? It's a juicy topic. But that whole idea is, we don't start, or I think it's quite rare that we start completely on purpose. We may get some inklings of what we're drawn to, especially when we start a business, but it evolves over time. I mean, I've see here that you describe yourself as an author, a therapist, a retreat leader, a recovery advocate, but that's probably not where things started. So could you take us back in time and what were your previous chapters? What did they look like?
Well, I spent 15 years in the corporate world, and probably the last 5 years of the corporate world was, really realizing I was not living my purpose. And from there, I took a calculated risk, and before just leaving the corporate world, I went and volunteered at the women's prison to see if I would like more counseling, coaching, social work type endeavors, and immediately loved it. So went back to it. I literally finished up a graduate degree and immediately applied right back to the same school for another program in clinical counseling. And so I started my second career, which is now over 20 years. And, I was almost 35 at that point, and I felt so old to be starting over, which, of course, that sounds like a baby now. But started in the world of counseling, and when I went that path, I also immediately, this is really interesting to me. When I was in grad school, I actually asked to be able to do an independent study on women's retreats. And I wanted to create my own retreat, market it, facilitate it, and, from nuts to bolts. And the professor approved it, and I did it, and it was successful. But what's so fascinating about that is I had never been on a retreat. I didn't know anything about retreats. And and at the time I didn't really think anything about it, but looking back, I'm like, where in the world did that come from?
That's a big question. Where in the world did that come from? That desire that just arrived. But I hear that sometimes with women, and I've found it myself a couple of times in my lifetime as well, where an idea just drops in from goodness knows where. Is that what it felt like? It just arrived, and you just had to pursue that one.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was just a matter of, okay, this is what I'm supposed to do, and it's really baffling to me at this stage. It's like, wow, where did that come from? And so it's been 20 plus years of doing women's retreats. And so I've been a therapist, and I've had all kinds of incarnations of that. But I always come back to women's retreats, and that's been a steady throughout the years. And so have been constantly thinking, okay, this is what the purpose is. This is the end result. And it's that there's been many incarnations of women's retreats as well. I thought it was about helping women find their purpose, or find the job they loved, or, create the life they love. But then about 10 years ago, I guess it was more like 11 years ago, in the midst of all of that, I just started really spiraling down with anxiety and depression. And looking back, I know I always had anxiety and depression, but at that point, it amped up tremendously. And it took me about a year to keep spiraling and trying to figure out what in the world was wrong with me, and why couldn't I manage my life? And ultimately what it came to was having to face the fact that I was an alcoholic, which was really, to be a smart woman, I was not very smart on that because I was in such denial, because it just didn't make sense to me. How could somebody, who had gone, 2 master's degrees and successful in corporate and all these different things, that, those two things just don't coexist. You can't be, in my mind, you can't be an alcoholic and be successful and continuing to do all these things. And also, I hadn't had any consequences. I hadn't wrecked a car or gotten a DUI or anything like that. But now, in retrospect, the consequence was that I was just horribly depressed and really high anxiety. So I got sober, and that kind of changed the trajectory of everything. And still remain, a therapist, and continue doing women's retreats, but have spent the past 10 years trying to figure out what the focus is. And ultimately, it always comes back to helping women find their authentic selves, which I think is a really big part of recovering from addiction. And I guess another consistent theme with me is, I have this goal in mind, and I think I know where I'm going. And it's like I plan on taking the freeway to California, and the universe keeps taking me on back roads and all kinds of detours. And so that's what's really happened over the past 3 years, because I ended up going to work for a residential addiction treatment center, which was never on my to-do list or bucket list. And but it's been one of the most powerful, transformative parts of my career. And it's kind of interesting, because it took some degree of humility with that, because as a therapist being in private practice, it's kind of like taking a step backwards. When your residential treatment is kind of grunt work, it's like it's 24/7. It's you're never off work, truly. But I kept listening to my gut. My head kept saying, no, you do not want to take this detour. But my gut was just like, this feels so right. And so I've been there for 3.5 years. And then it's finally dawned on me, the purpose of taking this detour is that since I've been there, a feminine model of recovery has come to me, formed, the idea was dropped in. I don't know how it actually happened, but that's what I'm like incredibly passionate about now. And all of a sudden it feels like everything in my entire life is at this culmination and everything makes sense. And I'm also not attached to what I think the outcome of is with this either, because I've learned to just take it a few miles at a time.
One day at a time, as it
comes. Right.
Yes,
exactly.
It's a really interesting. There's so many questions that are bubbling around as I hear you take me through those steps of where you've been and how you evolved. But I think one of the biggest ones is exploring this concept of hindsight, that if we look backwards, we can then see the steps that we took to get to where we are. But when we're actually on the path, it doesn't seem like they're connected at all. It's like I'm over here, I'm over there, I've got these detours as you described them. I wanted the main road, the freeway to California. Why am I in the boondocks? Why am I in the back streets? But when we look back, we can see so often that, that's why. Exactly as you said, if you hadn't been exposed to that residential treatment centre, perhaps your own feminine version or model of recovery would not have had the same opportunity to flourish and develop, because you wouldn't have had that consistent exposure to what women were experiencing.
Exactly. And I've finally learned that, the universe has far more creative plans for me than I can come up with. And I really have learned to trust my gut when, there's something that, if it feels right, even though logically it doesn't sound right, I really do tune in and like, what is my body saying? And I'm getting much, much better at going, okay, I don't understand it. This makes no sense, but it feels right. So let's do it.
Let's do it. Actually, I remember one of the things that stood out from when we last had a conversation was your description of the body barometer. I've actually said that so often to other women. There was this wonderful woman I had a conversation with, and she spoke about the body barometer and how important it is. Can you just dig down into that a little bit more? Because this is around women's intuition. I think,
yes,
we know stuff, we feel stuff, and I think the ego, i.e. the head, which is trying to, the inner critic, the negative inner voice, that's trying to keep us on the path of almost like perfection and achievement. But the body barometer is telling us, which is much more about purpose and passion. Can you just talk more about that for us, Tammy?
Sure. I think part of it is that just, the society that we live in now is just so technologically advanced and so in the head. And we're just really conditioned and trained to think about everything logically and analyze and overanalyze and that type thing. But the real brain is we literally have neurotransmitters in our stomach, in our gut, that connect to the brain. So we've got our literal gut, but then we have our heart, which also is a very, very intuitive part of the body. And also the vagina. Women, that's our power source. So like just tuning in from our whole torso and just noticing what we feel, our body will give us all kinds of information. We see that over and over when we're stressed and not taking care of ourselves. The body is the first to respond and will shut us down to get us to slow down and listen to our intuition. So I've really gotten some amazing results from when I'm, just so baffled about something or indecisive. Just sit down and literally, what am I noticing in my body? And don't think about what I'm noticing, but just literally notice the sensations and just be still and just experience it. And it will always very quickly point me in the right direction.
I think with what you were saying there about the stopping, be still, listen. I know one of my own defaults is busyness and that feeling of responsibility and so many things that need to happen and get done. And when I'm in that sort of state, my intuition it's crowded out.
Right,
it can't get a voice in edgeways. It's just not possible. So one thing that I've been doing lately, since I've moved to this new home, I've discovered just down the road on the waterfront, there is this beautiful old sailing club, big old wooden sailing club with these huge windows looking over the harbour at all the boats, and they do yoga there. I finally started a yoga practice after, 49 years. Took a while.
Oh, wonderful.
But that yoga practice and taking some time out in the morning, I've got a thing called the Calm app. I know technology can deliver some good things.
Yes, exactly.
It's all a balance, isn't it? But
Right.
listening to a morning meditation, doing a bit of journaling, getting to yoga, I actually feel for the first time I can hear my body. I think the thing was just beaten into submission for so long. I have very high expectations of it just coping and getting on with things. And I feel like I'm turning a bit of a corner at the moment of actually listening to it, of actually appreciating it, lumps and bumps and all, and being appreciative of its resilience and how it served me. But it's time to take better care of it. So those are a couple of practices that have helped me. Is there any other practices that, with all the retreats that you've been running and your experience with women and your own experience, what other sort of practices help us to turn up the volume on our intuition so that we can lean into the body barometer more clearly?
Well, definitely everything you've mentioned. And I would also include in that nature, getting out in nature, that alone can really turn up the volume on the intuition and turn down the volume on the head. And that listening to dreams, like tracking your dreams, keeping a dream journal, and the more, once you start paying attention to the dreams, they'll show up even more and more vividly too. But that is an excellent way to get to the subconscious and what's trying to get your attention. And dreams they're so creative in how they'll give just really interesting symbols and metaphors. And usually, like when there's a strong message that your intuition is trying to get to you and you get it through a dream, it's like an instantaneous knowing, like you just know. And then the overanalyzing and going back and forth is over because there's just this aha moment that's so powerful. So that's one of my favorite, is just tracking my dreams. And daily meditation. I hear so many people say, well, that doesn't work for me. I can't meditate. And I've been meditating for probably 12, 14 years or something like that. And honestly, I don't know if I've ever missed a day, because from the time I started, I knew it was something that my nervous system just desperately needed. So I've been a really dedicated meditator, but I will also say that to this day, I can sit for 20 minutes and my mind never shuts up. So it's like, I don't know I never know what'll happen. I might have a really deep, peaceful meditation, or I might just sit there with monkey mind the whole time, but it's all about the practice. And I definitely believe in the premise that it's not what happens during the meditation, it's the result you get outside of meditation. And I absolutely see that happening, that as long as I keep show up every day and keep doing it, it really has transformed my life and just keeps me a lot more in tune to it. Just, helps to quieten everything inside so that I can hear those little, intuition comes in different ways. And for me, it's just kind of this, a sudden sense of knowing, like all of a sudden I'll just be like, oh, this, it comes to me. And other people, they might, they might hear things, or I don't know, it comes in different ways for different people. But for me, it's just a sense of knowing. And a lot of times my body will give me the information, like if I'm leaning toward a certain way and I tune into my body and I feel nauseous, well, that's a pretty clear message. And if I, if then I tune in to the other route and I feel a tingling in my heart center, then I've got my answer. And I don't argue with that, because I really do trust my body in that way.
That's a big word, that word trust. And I think my experience, rather, I feel my experience is that as us women are moving further into our lives and we're opening these next chapters and we're listening more to our hearts, that move from, Wayne Dyer said it well, from success to contribution, that type of thing, that we can start to understand this feeling of lightness versus heaviness about the decisions that are placed in front of us. And I do believe that comes much more from a heart space. But I think the way that you just described that, this is profound. I have to go back to this. It's not what happens during the meditation practice. It's the results you get outside of the practice. That's huge. And that's definitely, if I ponder that, I know the truth in that statement. It rings true for me because I struggle to make my mind be quiet. It's the nature. Right. It's the nature of minds to think and to just do so much activity. And I think where I got stuck with the idea of meditation for many years is I literally had this: I must sit cross-legged and with a pure and empty mind.
Yes.
And it just doesn't work. Like, everything from did you put the washing out to what about that email to what's happening with your son at uni to la 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 la. So it's the ability to just see the thought and let it go. But that's why I use with the Calm app, again, I use meditations that actually they talk to me for a while, then they leave me in the quiet space. And then they
that's a great way.
I honestly, at first I felt like I was cheating. It's like, this isn't proper meditation. You're not doing it right. So having to let go of that one as well. But I do really feel that how you describe that, it's the results that you get outside, which is just this, at first perhaps even intangible feeling of just feeling a little bit more chilled, a little bit more open, a little bit more present, a little bit slower. And goodness knows, with the speed that my head's gone at for years, even incremental improvements in that area are much, much appreciated.
Yes.
Well, when you were talking about central themes, and I think this is something that I'd really like to explore a little bit more, this concept of, I believe we uncover our purpose. I think it's already there. I really believe that the way that we as individuals are put together, that there is something that we are more drawn to, we are more fluent in than other areas of our life. And if we look back, we'll find the central theme that runs through. Now, you found that your theme has always been to help people find their authentic selves. Would you agree that that feels like the central theme?
Yes.
Yeah, where mine is certainly the central theme has always been inspiring people to increase their self-belief, to understand that they can do the thing that they want to do. So they're quite aligned in some ways, what you and I do. But it's changed over the years. And it doesn't mean your purpose has suddenly metamorphosized. It just means that it's evolved and you've become more aligned with the deeper sense of that purpose. Is that a fair description, do you think?
Yeah, I definitely think so. It's because I'm still doing the same type work, but I've just narrowed my focus down more to women who struggle with addiction. And we're still getting to that core, finding your authentic self, but we've got to move through the layers that have created this addiction to start with. So, I think it's just more like I've honed in. It's like I kind of have a visual of, like a bullseye target. And I was at the outer circles and just kept moving inward to the bullseye. And here I am thinking I'm close to the bullseye, and you'll talk to me again in 3 years and I'll say, well, I still wasn't there, but I definitely have seen this process of it keeps I can't think of the word I'm really trying to think of, but it's a honing in, discerning, narrowing down, focusing kind of process.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. And if you're looking at that through an entire business lens, one might say that, well, you're becoming more and more niched. You're getting your niche, instead of being broad and shallow, is now narrow and deep. Exactly. And I feel we are drawn to that sort of experience. Well, the women in my world are certainly drawn to that sort of experience. I've described it as, I don't want to be a jet ski rider. I want to be a deep sea diver. Like that's the way that I want to approach the world. And like yourself, I run retreats as a part of the mastermind programs, because getting away and really connecting with other women and talking, speaking, conversing, sharing wholeheartedly in that very safe environment, it just, it makes my heart sing. It really does. Yes. I love it. And I think we're cut from the same cloth in that respect. But let's talk about the recovery piece for a moment, because I'm also in recovery. It's coming up to 12 years. So I certainly understand that journey. That's how you and I first connected when I read your book. Was it Vodka and Chardonnay? I forgot the title.
High Bottom, Letting Go of Vodka and Chardonnay. And then the other one was New Bottom, Turning the Other Cheek.
That was right. Yes, because I've got both of those copies and could really relate to the story that's happening there. But for me, addiction, and whether it be to substances, which is what you're primarily dealing with, whether it be to busyness, to people pleasing, to exercise, food, digital devices, whatever. There are so many different forms of addiction. But to me, it comes down to that core of this feeling of unworthiness. I believe it's tied to our self-worth. And perhaps a description that you would align with there is the authentic self. It's being, there's something like we talk about in recovery circles about having this need to fill the hole in the soul. And I think it's like a continuum. You don't have to be, a recovering or a sober alcoholic to understand this feeling of not enoughness. Could you talk to that, where you feel that these needs to fill ourselves and numb ourselves, where that comes from?
Yes. I mean, I think it's a pretty complex, that's what my last 3 years and working in the treatment industry, but along with 10 years of digging into my own recovery, is just recognizing, oh my goodness, this is so much more than, which you and I both know it's not a matter of willpower, because if it was, we would have gotten sober long before we did. But it's so much more than just an addiction to substances. It's the work that I've done is, I mean, it's shame-based. It's a lack of worthiness. It's a hole in the soul, but it's also, there's a lot of neuroscience around just coming into the world with a dysregulated nervous system in the beginning. That in and of itself is a huge part of this, and having a nervous system that doesn't produce enough dopamine and serotonin and endorphins, and like always seeking these things that are like a warm swaddle. It's a feeling of internal contentment and safety that we're lacking, and that is directly tied to not feeling worthy. So it's really complex and kind of a matrix, and ultimately the work is about calming the nervous system down and then building the self-worth, and digging into those underlying beliefs that we're not enough and reprogramming those, creating new neural pathways, and really learning how to nurture ourselves, really take care of ourselves. And part of the model that I've worked on for women is that I've been doing just a lot of informal research over the past 3 years, and I'm finding that women who struggle with addiction are incredibly sensitive people. And I've used the work of Elaine Aron, who has spent the last 20 years studying the highly sensitive person. And so all the women that I work with, I have them take her assessment, and I mean, I would say I'm at like 98 to 99% of the women I work with score very high as a highly sensitive person. And so we take that and just look at how being a highly sensitive person in possibly a dysfunctional family or other environmental factors that might have been going on, how just raw and painful that can be, and then how that can manifest into symptoms of anxiety and depression, and then how we learn to start coping through patterns of codependence, people pleasing, and ultimately, I think that the codependency part is what we end up numbing out, because we're getting all of our validation externally instead of it being an inherent internal process. And so that's where we start numbing that out, and we keep amping up the codependence and people pleasing, and we get further and further away from this true sensitive root of who we are. And so the healing process is learning to set boundaries, take care of ourselves, build up our self-worth, recognize we're highly sensitive, know how to treat this highly sensitive nervous system that we have, and then recognize the gifts that come with it, because a highly sensitive person is also very intuitive and empathic and connected to the universe and spiritual, and really connected with art and music. And so there's all these gifts that come with it, but we've got to be healthy enough to tap into those gifts rather than it feeling like we're just a raw nerve.
I've got absolutely no doubt that there is women listening to your description just then going with little lights just popping all over their head and body. If that's me, that's me. That's how I feel. I'll put a link to that description, that assessment you were talking about. But could you just say the woman's name again for me?
Elaine Aron, Aron.
Aron. Awesome. I'll make sure that goes in, because, yes, it's interesting. My lovely husband of many, many, many years has always sort of shook his head, looked at me and said, "You're just wired differently, Angela."
Yeah.
And
I really believe it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. And there's that high sensitivity that so many of us have in terms of feeling hurt. For sure, I can relate to that one as well. But can I dig in for a moment there on the self-belief piece, the self-worth piece, because it's certainly what I find more often than not with women who are keen to step into a next chapter, to express themselves in a certain way, to have a particular type of service or business, or to write a certain blog post or whatever the case may be. The fear of judgment, the feeling that they're not enough, that their work's not good enough. I see women get really stuck in the comparison trap. That's a whole other conversation. But how can we go about, say some first steps, if you're conscious that is something that holds you back a lot, this feeling of not enoughness? How would you reassure, and what could you encourage women to do to start healing that sense of self not being there?
Meditate. I go there on everything, because and I'm serious when I say that. I think that is a foundational piece, is because that sense of unworthiness, it's usually very much embedded in the nervous system, and that there's this sense of fight or flight in there, and getting triggered and feeling like, oh, I'm just not good enough. And what meditation does is it really calms all that. It calms it down, but it helps us connect to that true essence of who we are. And it brings a level of awareness where we can start noticing the thoughts and the beliefs, and then we can challenge them. Because I think when you're just so amped up in the frantic pace, you don't even recognize your own thoughts or beliefs. You're just going at such a fast pace. And that's one of the biggest things that I think meditation has given me, is all of a sudden it feels like there's space, and I can recognize, oh wait, that's just a thought, and just because I think it doesn't mean it's true. And let me break that down. Do I have any evidence that's that's true? Could the exact opposite possibly be true? So there's a lot of just taking time to notice what is coming up, and then challenging it, and like literally reprogramming yourself, like, well, no, I'm choosing not to believe that. And I'm going to, if it's posting affirmations all around, or if it's just in addition to meditation, another technique that find really powerful is called the emotional freedom technique. And you can Google that, and it's tapping on acupressure points, and it really flushes out the blocked energy that keeps us stuck. And you tap out these beliefs and you tap in new beliefs. And when I say tap, you're literally like tapping on your face and top of your head, and it's hitting on acupressure points.
There's another. I'm just giggling here in the background because, I went and did training in the emotional freedom technique because it really appealed to me. There's another. But since we had our original conversation, and there's a particular form of EFT which I found that really connected with me called conscious choices. It's an approach that allows you, as you were just suggesting, that you notice something that you would like to challenge and change, and you make a conscious choice as to how you would like to feel, and that's what you tap in. And I find it really powerful. And it's interesting because what was coming up as I was hearing you talk about that, and as we slow down and we become aware of those thoughts, because some of us are aware. I think people are at different stages of awareness, and we're waking up as we move forward in time, and we just I don't know, I think older and wiser is actually true, but but it's really interesting, I think, how quick we are to accept our negative thoughts, the negative opinions of ourselves, that we've heard them, we've said them to ourselves so often, it doesn't always dawn on us that we can actually not believe it. Just because it's a thought, it doesn't make it true. I could sit here and think I'm a unicorn. It doesn't make it true.
Exactly.
Silly example, but because we've had those neural pathways reinforced for so long, the negative side, they're not good enough, they're not measuring up, the what will everyone think, it's almost as though they are sort of burned into our soul. And the time that it takes and the attention and the focus that it can take to shift that, it's so worthwhile to do that work, because there's a whole new world waiting, a whole new world waiting. Well, those are two great things. The meditation, yes, you and I are both going to bang on that drum for a bit longer. But I'll also put a link in the show notes to it's Patricia Carrington's Conscious Choices EFT, which
I like that.
I introduced my own clients to it, and obviously myself. I've talked to my kids about it, because it takes effort. I don't believe that you can change a belief. It sounds like a tautology, just like that. I believe it's like tending a garden. If you think of the garden of our heart, of our mind, of our soul, whatever. But if we allow the weeds to just start to creep back, if we don't go back and weed them regularly, pretty soon your garden doesn't look so great any longer.
Exactly. Yes.
I feel like a great unfurling as a result of the conversation, Madonna. So as we're coming to the full circle of this conversation, I wanted to, first of all, ask you about this quote, because I think this quote that you have identified as a favourite of yours, it's, as you said, it's a bit of paraphrasing. It's from our mutual girl crush of Brené Brown. But you said here that what you love is, we have to be willing to disappoint others to not abandon ourselves. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I think in the recovery world, as I'm working with women in recovery, that is one of the most important concepts of all, because what we tend to do as women, especially, is we just keep saying yes and piling on, and we don't want to hurt people's feelings, and we have the superwoman complex and all of that, and it leads to being overwhelmed, burned out. It leads to resentment, and that will lead to relapse for a woman in recovery. But even for somebody not in recovery, the same thing. It leads to all those things, and then it leads to being just, snappy and acting in ways that aren't your authentic self, and, aren't how you really want to be in the world. So this whole concept of building up self-worth and learning to set boundaries I think it's just absolutely critical, and I think it's critical for us to be modeling it for younger women. And in the beginning, especially, it's just so hard and it's so scary because we don't like to disappoint people. But I think it's kind of like, creating new neural pathways. It's a muscle too. And the more you're able to say no, without having to defend or justify, it gets easier. And I'm really to a point now. I typically don't even give a reason because people don't care about the reason. That I think in the past when I would say no, I can't because this and that. If nobody wants to hear that, they just tell me yes or no. So. Yeah. I've found so much freedom in just, really learning my own boundaries. And that's also tied into the highly sensitive person, because once I found out that I'm a highly sensitive person, I've read a lot about it, and I require more downtime, more quiet time than the other 80% of the population who's not highly sensitive. So it's even more critical for anybody that scores highly on that.
Absolutely. It's about honoring yourself. It's about understanding who you are, what it is that you need as an individual, and being unapologetic in a nice way, but unapologetic about creating the surroundings and the experiences, or sometimes lack of experiences, i.e. leave me alone for a while, that you need so that you can thrive. I think it would be very difficult for us to evolve into our purpose if we don't take care of ourselves, because we are the vessel through which we would deliver our work in the world, what we're here to do. And if that vessel is cracked, broken, exhausted, resentful, etc., whether you suffer from a classic addiction or a different type of people-pleasing, etc., then it is very difficult to make our mark on the world. So very, very wise advice, my friend. So where can we find you online? Women who this conversation is resonating with them. I know we're at opposite sides of the world, but the power of technology doing good can connect us just like this. So where can our listeners go and find you?
The website is hercirclerecovery.com.
Awesome. I'll make sure I put that link into the show notes as well. And what social media platforms do you like to play on?
Pretty much Facebook. I try others, but I always come back to Facebook. I just haven't mastered those others yet.
And perhaps, like, as you evolve, then that's the one for you. We don't have to pop all over all the different platforms. We stay in the ones that work for us and feel good to us.
Right.
Tammy, it's been a wonderful conversation. I love how you've shown and you've shared with us that evolution that has happened for you. I really want our listeners to understand that, purpose, it doesn't usually arrive in a great, orchestrated moment and the heavens opened and my purpose descended. It's not like that. It's about dialing up our awareness and just moving, as you described so beautifully, a little closer to that bullseye, as we go along in life. Is there any words that you would like to leave our listeners with in terms of encouragement on the path, the journey that they're on?
Well, I don't know if this is encouraging or not, but it's one last thought. I was just thinking about, as far as the Brené Brown quote about, being willing to disappoint other people, to honor yourself. When we were talking about that, I was just thinking about how much I wish that I could trust that everybody that I engage with would tell me no, and that I can trust that they're not taking on something that they don't want to do, or that they're not building a resentment, or that, they're not overworked. I was just thinking what a breath of fresh air that would be if we as women could commit to each other in that way, because I just don't like the thought of, somebody saying yes to me when inside they're screaming no. So I don't know. I just hope, maybe the encouragement would be to, really, really honor what that voice inside is saying. If you can't do it for you, do it for the other person.
I love that perspective, that very open, wholehearted perspective again there, Tammy, which epitomizes the way that you show up in the world. So wanting to honor us, also saying our no's, appreciating that. Yeah, we're all connected. So there is a definite positive domino effect there. I'm going to go out in the world and be just like that today. God darn it! I'll have a chat, but I'm not sure what my daughter to be just this morning. She has a lot of chores. Oh, Tammy, thank you so much again. Really appreciate your open-heartedness conversation and just sharing what the journey has been like for you. And I have no doubt that when we talk again a few years down the track, you'll be even closer to that bullseye, and something else would have come up, something else would have unfolded that feels really right in that body barometer of yours. So thank you, my darling.
Oh, thank you so much. It was lovely talking to you, as always.
Thank you. And you, my lovely listener, I hope that this conversation has hit you in the heart as well and giving you some guidance and some ideas about how you can be moving closer to your own bullseye, shall we call it, as your purpose unfolds and as your next chapter unfolds. There's so much more that's waiting for you, be that a large step or just a little tiny step that feels more aligned with the woman that you're becoming. So the message that we're wanting you to have had so clearly today is to pause, to find some space, to listen inwardly and really see what your intuition is telling you. And then starting to take the steps to build that courage and that self-worth, that feeling that you can move forward closer to the thing that's calling you. And we both very much wish that for you. Now, there is a resource that I've just recently created that may be helpful as just a small part of this journey. It's a purpose uncovering ebook, an exercise book with some questions. We look at purpose through the lens of business in terms of how you will bring your gifts to the world. And hopefully as you work through this ebook, there may be a closer unfolding for you as well. So to grab that, there's a link in the show notes, but also you simply go to angelarasmus.com/purpose and you can grab yourself a copy and start some journaling today. So thank you for spending your time here with Tammy and myself, and I look forward to sharing more stories for you in this series and on the Your Next Chapter podcast. Take care and have a wonderful day. Thanks for listening to the Your Next Chapter podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please let me know. Pop over to angelarasmus.com to subscribe to the show and leave a review. And whilst you're there, you can also enjoy valuable free resources, including show notes and downloads, along with the Next Chapter community, where you can connect with other wholehearted women on the same journey as you. We'd love to welcome and support you as your next chapter unfolds. See you next time.